Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, 1971's Erwin C. Dietrich's, that title right there that I cannot pronounce, but I believe it's roughly translated Blood Seducers Volume 1, and this is part of the new Ingrid Steger collection. And this is the back of the Blu-ray put out by Ascot Elite, region-free German Blu-ray got from diabolicdvd.com. And this is volume 1, directed by Erwin C. Dietrich, music by Walter Baumgartner, and the camera was Peter Baumgartner, the nephew of Walter, the score composer who also did a lot of scores for Jess Franco films. This is 1971. Ingrid Steger actually did a bunch of films for Erwin C. Dietrich. I believe she started off as a model, and then he found her, and she loved doing movies. She did a bunch of films, more of which I'll be reviewing on this YouTube page. But this is volume 1, and I do not know how to pronounce that, but I believe it's roughly translated Blood Seducers. And this is volume 1. I believe there are 3 volumes of this. And let's get into the film. If you know the Schoolgirl Reports series, I've done a bunch of reviews in this YouTube page for the Schoolgirl Reports series, and many more to come to finish up that series in the future. This is Erwin C. Dietrich's version of in many ways, the Schoolgirl Reports series. It acts as an anthology film of different sexual stories involving a lot of what the roughly translated title deals with, which is seduction. And seduction from younger girls to older men, and sometimes older women. This has a wraparound story as well that revolves around a group of people, I guess journalists, doing reports. There's that word report from the Schoolgirl Report, doing a series of reports in a magazine or some kind of publication, and they're looking for different types of sexual stories. And each one of them shares a new story, and there's a lot of people in that room, so there are a good number of stories in this movie, and each one shares a story, and there's a bit of a twist at the end in the wraparound story that is lightheartedly comedic, but in the context of all the stories can be a bit disturbing as well. And so as each person mentions a story, the movie goes into that anthology of sorts. You start to enter into that story. Now, some of these stories are quite short, and now the full movie is 77 minutes long. So when you have a large number of stories such as in this particular case, you know that some of these stories are going to be quite short, and they are. And then some are a bit longer, but I would say we're really, full throttle here with the amount of stories. So let's get into the film. There's a lot of different variety and wildness and sexuality, of course, being a true blood erotic sexploitation film with some I guess some hints of comedy in here as well. We start off with the music by Mr. Walter Baumgartner, who is the uncle of the cinematographer in this film and in many of Erwin C. Dietrich's films, interestingly enough. The score in here is very varied, very diverse and rich. Of course, we have some sultry, sleazy jazz. We have great percussion elements in this film. We have some simplicity in instruments as well, like just the piano or just some acoustic guitar noodling, some late 60s, early 70s rock, funk rock, psychedelic type rock. Really sounds 60s in some regards. And we have some orchestration in the score as well that it evokes some sort of a little bit of mystery, some mood, and of course, sexuality. The score definitely has a foundation in jazz, I would say, and it's great stuff. And some of the time, the music is incredibly synced with the editing of the film and with what is happening on the screen. Not all the time, but some of the time, in particular with the percussion in the score. And there's a great amount of um, just kind of percussion on its own, which was a fairly common concept in the 70s with, albums being released, like this one band named Niagara, a very pretty rare album that you can get on twoheadeddog.com. I have not gotten that yet, but where it would just be percussion based, psychedelic percussion. But in this particular case, I mean, you have this kind of jazzy percussion, and I would say some exotic tinges to the music as well. I heard a little bit of Spanish territory, possibly, and so some definite exotic touches and orchestration that evokes different moods, sometimes evoking some mystery as well. Now, in terms of the cinematography for this film, having seen a lot of Schoolgirl Report films so far, I would definitely say that this film is very different and stands out as an Erwin C. Dietrich film. We definitely have a lot of playfulness in the cinematography in this film and in the direction of this film, and of course in the stories of the film. Um, but we have some rapid fire editing that goes on at the beginning of the film and also at the end of the film. Definitely at the beginning of the film, this really high speed editing. And the last time I saw high speed editing like this was actually in the Stray Cat Rock series that I've reviewed on this YouTube page. So some really rapid fire editing where you're kind of flipping from, uh, two different objects or two different people's faces, and you're flipping at high speed. We also have some really interesting um, like flip book images that are really on a poster in a girl's room, and you're going from one image to the next image to the next image to the next image to the next image, and it evokes motion like a flip book, and there are definitely some comedic tinges, some ironic tinges to that. Set of images, and that definitely has comedy to it at the conclusion of the images. Um, we have some interesting reverb in that scene as well in terms of sound design. Some interesting moaning reverb that almost sounded like it was a battlefield at times. Um, there are, Irwin in particular, there's one story in here where that involves a painter and a girl, and his direction, his cinematography in the film is so erotic, so well done in its eroticism as we're focusing on the girl's lips and on her breast and on um, just her, I believe her eyeball, and it's very erotic. You can see her wet lips, and you really close on the nipples. As a matter of fact, the beginning of this film, the opening credit sequence to this film, is body parts, and it still frames on a vagina, on a hairy vagina for the remainder, a good portion of the opening credits. So there is such a um, eroticism to the cinematography in here, where a man is looking at a girl, and the camera is also doing the same thing and evoking the emotions and the sultry sweat and seduction in the camera work. So it's really, really well done. Um, there's no violence in this particular film, but for the most part, there's a playfulness to the stories, except for, I mean, there's one in particular involving a girl working at a gas station, which is it's definitely not gas pump girls. Let me just say that. It kind of sets apart the gas station, and she kind of seems like she's there beyond her control. And just the seduction that pervades all of the stories. Girls lying to men to get them to bed, girls trying to break men. Um, and there's and some guys just outwardly not even wanting to give in to their advances. And there's one story that reminded me of the Schoolgirl Report series where the girl and with her teacher, and she basically tries to seduce him, blackmail him, um, in a way to make him have sex with her, or else, which reminded me of a Schoolgirl Report story involving a grandfather and his granddaughter, which was a very controversial segment. But in this particular film, for the most part, they're very playful, short pieces. Um, that everything from a hitchhiker to a girl on a beach with a painter, to a group of guys who you know have this stripper that they go to, or I guess is a prostitute, and she dances for them to music with a beat, as she says, um, to you know a large variety of stories, I would say, in here. I mean, there's a lot of stories, to a football players, some sports guys being seduced, to even there's one lesbian story in here that I thought was possibly one of the most explicit stories in here, involving Ingrid Steger, a piano teacher, and the interesting rhythm of the story with the metronome for the piano class. In terms of the sexuality in here, we have full frontal nudity from men and women, and backsides, and gyrations and everything, but it all looks implied. But we do get very close to the vagina, but the vagina is not open, or it's not hard, it's not explicit, but by all means, this is an extremely visually sexual film, topically and everything else, an adult, but it's not invasive, or it seems all implied, although it looks close to not being implied, if you catch my drift, because you have humping, you have moaning, you have faces going very close to the oral regions, to the down regions there. So it's a rapid fire kaleidoscope in many regards, and in one particular case, we have a girl on a bus who likes peas, big peas. It's crazy, and it's narrated like it's a fairy tale, which reminded me of a movie that I reviewed in here called Once Upon a Time, or Once Upon a Tale, I believe it's called. Kind of an adult cartoon, but it was narrated like a fairy tale. So there's some diversity, definitely, in each one of these stories, and some armpit hair as well, if you're not accustomed to that. All the girls are attractive in their own right, all different styles. And there's male skin in here, for people who want that. I mean, some guys taking a shower and things like that, which was not in your typical realm, even in the Schoolgirl Report series. But we have redheads, blondes with Ingrid Steger, lots of diversity in the women in this film. Everybody's sexually attractive, and it has a little bit of a twist comedic ending here as well. So this title, which I cannot pronounce right there. I believe it's Blood Seducers, which, if that's the title, that is quite a wild title, right? Blood Seducers, or Blood Seduction Volume 1, right here, put out by Ascot Elite, German region-free Blu-ray, right here. And look, it's rated 16. My gosh, can you even imagine? I mean, people think America is too wild. We would never rate this movie 16. It would be at least NC-17. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you for watching the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page, where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more, like this film, Volume 1 from the Ingrid Steger collection. Here it is, Volume 1. 2 more volumes to go, and maybe more. Thank you, folks, and have a great night.